to, I guess we should just start with what biodiesel is. So biodiesel itself is methyl esters. Basically, it's used as an alternative to diesel fuel in diesel engines. You can run it basically anything that has a diesel engine. So boat, bus, your tractor, generators. Our fuel is all distilled, so it's a little different than most people's backyard stuff. All of our fuel, it's very pure, it's clear in color. Of course, it's has lower emissions than petroleum diesel. It's a lot higher flash point, so it's a lot less flammable. It's classified differently. So, like for our fuel stations, they're generally class 3 combustible instead of flammable. So, different regulations surrounding that. If you spill it, it's not really an environmental hazard, depending on your context. Obviously, if you spill a lot, some issues can occur. But as far as that, it's biodegradable, which is nice. And it's very similar to diesel fuel, has about 95% of the BTUs, so slightly less. You get about 5% less power. However, while driving your vehicle, you're not actually going to notice that in nearly any case. And of course, we produce it here. I mean, that's one of the biggest differences too. Made from usually used cooking oil, but also rendered grease trap waste, tallow. We ourselves collect about 2.5 million gallons of used cooking oil in the state of Hawaii. And then we bring in about another 2.5 to 3 million gallons of tallow, used cooking oil, and any other oils that we can process from the West Coast. We have gotten oils from other places occasionally, but generally it's all either collected within Hawaii or from the West Coast. This is our plant over in Keaau. Since you were there at the grand opening, this was taken that day, actually. I think this is one of the pics I actually took that day. This is back before we had a lot of the other equipment in front of the columns there, but we thought we'd actually be able to park over there. Anyway, from left to right, though, if you're looking at the distillation columns, the one on the far left, that thick one, is that's our fuel distillation column. So in there, under vacuum, all of our fuel is distilled at over 400 plus degrees Fahrenheit. And in the middle, we can see that that long distillation column. That's for methanol recovery. So we're able to recycle most all the methanol that we use in the process, any excess methanol in the process. And then next to that, we have the glycerol stripper on the right side, and that purifies the glycerin. This is our control room and lab. So this is where they can actually control all the valves and things going to our tanks and pumps. It's pretty automated, but of course you have guys behind the controls. This is one of the our longest using fleets. They've been using for about 15 years. So it's the city and county of Honolulu. We've been using it in B20 blend, so it's a 20% blend with that'd be 80% petroleum diesel, and they've been using that in 1,000 pickup trucks, dump trucks, ambulances, and garbage trucks. A lot of our customers also use B100, which is pure biodiesel. So like we have a lot of tour boats over on Maalaea and a couple in Lahaina on the Maui Island. And then over here, of course, we use it in our fleet 100%. We've had a couple other larger fleets using B20. So like was it Maui Disposal? They've been using for a long time. in a 20% blend. DHX, they were using in B20 until we stopped selling B20 over on Maui the last 2 months ago. They were using it for a long time. Most of our fuel, though, actually isn't going to transportation. Most of our fuel is used in, Hamakua Energy actually uses about half of it themselves. And then Hiko as well. They use a lot. So that would be 2.5 to 3 million gallons at least going probably to Hamakua Energy per year. And as you can see here, these ISO containers, this is how we transport not only our fuel, but we have separate ones for things like our glycerin, or we bring in methanol in these containers. We also transport cooking oil, our grease trap waste inner island, so we can process them. These containers are basically how we're moving everything around. And of course, when we're using our trucks and when we're using when other people are hauling, we try to encourage them to use biodiesel as well. But for our trucks, of course, they're all going to be on biodiesel. Now here's a picture of the generators out at the Schofield plant. So they use biodiesel as well. Just a note for scale. The first generation's biodiesel plants are a lot smaller, a few 100,000 gallons a year. Our plant is about 5.5 million gallons a year of biodiesel. And that's about the smallest you can really make a plant using our kind of technology, using like the methanol recovery and the kinds of pre-processing steps that we do. If you try to do it on a smaller scale, it's kind of hard just because of the added expense for all that infrastructure. We really get a lot of advantages for getting bigger. But anyway, just an important note. We have a farm on Maui. We grow sunflowers. Generally, though, we actually grow them for cooking oil. There's more value to us in that. If you're growing it strictly for fuel, you're getting a fraction of what people will pay for cooking oil. So if you're going to grow on a small scale, then you're going to want to use a higher value end product in order for that to make sense. Once we start farming on a much larger scale, we're talking, above, 5,000-10,000 acres, then you can start to see, especially now with the price for feedstocks and also for petroleum diesel being so inflated as they are, farming can make a little more sense, even if you're growing just for fuel. To me, if you're looking at like an economic analysis for growing, I think it's important to have all of those products in mind. So you process at a larger scale, and then you have multiple products, including that high-end product and the kind that, you can take advantage of that scale. And biodiesel is one way you can take advantage of that for, crushing seeds and getting high-protein meal, which is your other product from that. And of course, as you know, any of you that do farming or familiar with farming in Hawaii, we don't really have a lot of feed sources here. And we don't really have any commercial feed available here, especially since the flour mill closed over on Oahu. I know a lot of farmers for a long time were using that mill run to help bulk out their feed they were bringing in. There's not a lot of products like that anymore. In the case for oil seeds, though, you're able to actually produce high protein meal, things that you can feed directly to chickens and pigs, as well as get that protein content and then bulk it out a little more for your ungulates. Anyway, if you have any more questions about about oil seeds, animal nutrition, and crushing and things like that, please ask. I'd love to talk about it some more. Here's one of our oil products right there. It's a cold pressed sunflower oil. Of course, we have a small crushing mill over on the Big Island. It's next to our refinery. When you guys come for the tour, I'll take you through that too. And then at the moment, we're growing the sunflower just on Maui, though. And that's just I only prepared a few slides for this. Are there any initial questions you guys have?
I have a question. I always
Please.
buy your cooking oil at Costco, but I've noticed that they're not carrying it anymore, or you're low on your supplies.
They do and they don't sometimes.
Okay.
Are you buying it at the Kona Costco or?
I've been buying it at the Hawaii Kai.
Oh, okay.
I'm out
Um,
of it.
yeah, they may not carry it all the time.
Okay.
I'm not sure when the last pallet was sent over there. I don't follow those sales directly myself anymore.
Anyway, it's a beautiful oil and
Oh, thanks.
a beautiful packaging. Your bottle is like awesome. I save the
Uh,
bottles and use them for all sorts of colorful things.
oh, those are the nocturne bottles. That was the bigger size. So we actually have a smaller size that we sell out of KTA
Yeah.
still. But, yeah, those are good bottles. Right after I had picked that one, we started to run out right before COVID, and as soon as COVID hit, I tried ordering some, and the supply chain just was not there.
Yeah.
I had to negotiate for like a whole container load at once. So it was that was a those bottles.
Peter, you have your hand up.
I
Yeah.
I do. I was just kind of curious what the feedstock that produces the heat for the distillation process is.
Oh, okay. Great. So I don't know if you can see the boilers in that picture. I don't think you can. Let me see if I have another
Okay.
picture. I don't have one right at hand. We have two boilers, and
Okay.
then we're able to use what we call column bottoms, which is essentially any it's like waste from our process. So we use column bottoms along with biodiesel, and we're able to actually heat our boilers using.
Okay. Thank you.
Initially, when we first built the plant, we put in a propane tank too, but propane was very expensive. It didn't really make sense for us to use that, and then we tried as much as we can to get away from fossil fuels. But so anyway, using the waste from our process, we're able to save some money there, and also not use fossil fuels.
Excellent. Thank you.
Chris, did you say that the Keaau facility also produces the cooking oil, or is that a different place?
Almost. It's actually in the next lot over, but it's kind of co-located.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. A question I have as well regarding, because there's sunflower, right? You're using these high oil seeds, but are there other potential sources that have been looked into in terms of sources
Yes.
for bio?
Yes. So back in 2010 and then 2000, I think somewhere around 16, we did two research projects. The Hawaii Military Biofuel Project 1 and 2. And during the first one, we studied, camelina, soy. I think they even planted some peanut. It was basically just done on like test fields, that kind of thing. The short answer is yes, you can use any oil. We've grown other stuff in the past, like jatropha. We actually, for a while, had a 200-acre jatropha farm down in Shipman lands, kind of just around Keaau, on the kind of on the east side of the highway. It's all papaya now, but that was actually one of the first jobs I had with the company. I drove the jatropha harvester, and then we'd go and it's like an over-the-row blueberry harvester, and then basically it drives over a hedge of trees, and then it beats them with beater bars, and then takes them up with conveyors, and then we built some custom processing equipment to husk those, and then we dry them out in the sun, kind of like you would coffee. And so the problem with crops like that, though, jatropha, is it doesn't produce an edible meal for livestock. So here you are doing all this work, all these inputs, and at the time it was supposed to be like a miracle crop where you didn't have to, didn't have to fertilize it much. You didn't have to water it that much, especially in a wetter climate. As it turns out, there are no miracle crops, and everything's a lot of work. Just in case anyone tries anything like that. But on the economic side, if you're only producing oil for fuel, it's a tough prospect. You have to be able to make some value added products out of everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the good things with sunflower is you're actually able to make a high protein meal that is palatable, and chickens and pigs can eat it. So when
what
you're
about
so,
what about the
please.
stalks and the leaves and everything else like that, Chris? The other.
So the fibrous biomass. So in the case for sunflower, when they dry down, the leaves will basically desiccate. Everything goes to basically the leaves drop and desiccate. The sunflower head starts to dry out. It folds over. You're basically left with a stalk and a head full of seeds. And when the combine comes through, it'll basically sort all that out and then put all the chaff in the field.
Hmm.
So that comes back. That'll actually, depending on your tilling practices, it'll either lay on top of the field in a way that you can kind of suppress some weeds, or you're going to want to reincorporate that organic matter into your soil column.
So did you say all those Jatropha plants are not in existence anymore in the shipment
Most
fields?
of them are papaya fields now.
Oh, because I remember way back when HCOC Giorgio Koyama was one of the forefront leaders in growing this for biofuel.
Yeah, we so Jamie and Christian Twigsmith planted that 200 acres that was out there.
Right.
And then we had SG Biofuels came out, and then we did a like a 1 acre like variety trial where we were growing like F1 hybrids from Guatemala, and those had some pretty decent like yields. But again, none of them were detoxified, so you're still ending up with trying to grow oil strictly for fuel without actually having a another product for the meal. And initially, compost could be an option, but it's really tough to sell compost in my experience.
Mitch?
I have two more questions, Chris. First of all, I noticed that your biodiesel is really clear, really clean. There's no yellow in it. It's like, is that because you're distilling it now? And
Yes. However, we also do add an antioxidant. So if you have more than, say, 100 or 200 gallons, it actually appears slightly red or pink.
Okay. The other part of my question is, there used to be a lot of concern about the impact on fuel lines and things like that, that the biodiesel was like a solvent and or it was clogging filters. Have we overcome that, or have they put in new types of rubber or what?
So Teflon coated fuel lines are compatible. Like every Coast Guard certified fuel line is compatible. If you have a vehicle prior to about 1993, there's a high probability it has rubber fuel lines, and those you'd probably have to replace.
Got it. So you don't have any problem with that anymore?
We don't usually. The only times I run into issues is when people make repairs using cheap fuel lines. So I remember I had a boat customer one time. He was having issues, and then he said, "Oh, well, I have this R30 fuel line." I was like, "Wait a second, you're not really supposed to be using that out on the water." But as it turns out, yeah, it was just a natural rubber fuel line that they had used, during their, boat maintenance, and even though they were actually supposed to.
Okay.
that is an issue. I have actually had a couple more recent like tractors. Like I had a Kubota tractor from I think it was like 2010, 2009 era that actually had rubber fuel lines on it. But as far as like road vehicles and in heavy vehicles, I haven't had that issue with the fuel lines unless they were replaced. But then also, because biodiesel does act like a bit of a solvent, if you've been using petroleum diesel for a long period, and then it'll actually clean out your lines. So you will want to change out your filter after your first tank, but after that, it's not an issue.
So it must be good for keeping your injectors clean on a diesel then.
It can be, yes, but it's not going to. That's not saying that using biodiesel you'll never have to replace an injector. I don't.
Right.
I definitely wouldn't guarantee that.
Right. Okay.
I have a question about sourcing. So you mentioned the West Coast and also the state, but are there other locations, source for the used oils and grease? Are you sourcing from?
We're not opposed from other places. It's really just where it's available.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Riley, you have your hand up.
Yeah. What's the percentage of the business model coming from the Hamakua Energy contract?
So at the moment, I'd say they take it. It varies how much they take month to month, but they would take about half of our current output.
So 50%.
That would be close, yeah.
And are you still supplying the 50 megawatt plant on Oahu?
The Schofield plant?
Yeah, the Schofield one.
Yes.
And at one point, the fuel was being analyzed by the Department of Defense, I think the Air Force, on the life and storage life of the fuel. And is there a estimated storage life for the fuel to still remain, active and viable, usable?
Yes. So if your storage conditions are good, with the current antioxidant we're using, we're able to guarantee 2 years for our fuel and storage.
So because I think what they're finding was that, and this is maybe why you added the antioxidant, was that within the fuel itself, there were still bacteria alive, and they would actually be the cause of the degradation of the fuel.
So you can actually get bacterial growth in biodiesel or petroleum diesel. Usually, though, that's only if your fuel has water in it. That seems to be the deciding factor more so than.
So if there's condensation in your tank, you could experience that.
Yes. However, biodiesel does tend to absorb a little more water. So as long as you're actually, changing out your fuel.
So ideally, for the 2-year length of storage time, you'd need really to have, no water, no oxygen kind of thing.
So exposure to air, light, and warmth are the things you don't really want for biodiesel storage or oil storage, for that matter.
Okay. And are you able to disclose your sale price to Hamakua Energy? What is the value of that?
Sale price?
Like dollars per gallon.
I don't have that here. I don't do that contract. I don't know that I'd be able to discuss their pricing or any customer's price. I can tell you what we retail for, though.
Okay.
So out of Keaau, we retail for $5.45 for on-road and $5.17 for off-road fuel.
Does that include highway tax?
So highway tax is included on the on-road fuel, so that's $5.45.
Okay.
How does
because
it compare? I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, on the PUC summary of power purchase agreement for 2022, it showed the Hamakua energy average energy price per kilowatt hour to the utility was 25.57 cents. So I was just, that's a lot higher than other providers. So I was wondering how your fuel might be influencing that, given that hopefully you're more price stable than the rest of the world with oil prices.
Oil prices don't affect us quite as much.
Right.
So it does affect, like when we bring in our chemicals or our feedstock from the West Coast, especially, and even inter-island pricing is affected as far as transportation. But our prices don't change nearly as much. We did see a big difference, especially in retail pricing for petroleum diesel this last year, and we were a lot less affected by that, but it still affected us quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Riley.
Yeah, good questions.
Chris, curious about, if I may ask, so who are your competitors? And are there competitors in the biodiesel space? I know there's fossil fuel out there, which eventually will go away. But just curious about whether or not there are other folks here that are doing this.
There's no other commercial producers of liquid fuel in the state of Hawaii, to my knowledge. There have been a lot of people who've kind of just made it for themselves over the years, with varying degrees of success. But to my knowledge, I don't know of any other like liquid biofuel producers in the state of Hawaii.
Okay, thank you. And I guess a follow-on question to that is: so is all of the product consumed here by Hamakua, Oahu, or is any of it like exported out to any
very
market?
Small amounts have been in the past. Like I've sent like 250-gallon totes at a time to, like, say, Palmyra Atoll for some government research project over there. What else? The Keaau, the sister ship to the Hokulea. I know they sailed with biodiesel over to what's it? Papeete, Tahiti. So while the Hokulea uses, of course, sails, but in their methods, the sister ship does use biodiesel. I know we tried to send some over there, but they couldn't quite figure out the logistics. And then I sent a couple totes to the West Coast this last year for testing. I know Cummins wanted some, and then I don't know how much we sent to Wabtec when they were doing their engine testing. It's pretty rare. Nearly all of our fuel stays in the state of Hawaii and is burned here.
Anybody have any other question or comment? So I think I have my questions addressed. I had a few here. One second. So the last question I have is just about scaling. So clearly it's a function of your feedstock, right? And there's only so much used cooking oil and grease that you can procure here, and therefore it's also coming from the West Coast. And then presumably the sunflower investment is to augment that. But is there sort of like is it limited as a result of just access to the feedstock, or is it just a function of just getting more of the stuff from the West Coast over?
I would say yes, it is limited by feedstock. Without local sources for more oil, I don't see how you could make more biodiesel.
And did you say earlier that you essentially have cornered most of it, like 90% of the used oil here in the state? Is
yes,
that the case? Okay.
So if we don't collect, so like for say Oahu, like we collect about 70% ourselves, The other guys bring it to us because, it's the easiest way to actually get rid of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's not a lot else out there that we can actually collect. Farming, crushing oil seeds, creating livestock feed. That's really more of a method for us to expand, but and also create jobs and make farming more possible here.
So this is perhaps mainly for Hawaii Island and maybe East Hawaii because your plant is here. But is there an opportunity for like households? Because people love to fry here, right? So they have these like gallon containers of used oil. So is it like very an established approach? Righty, thank you. Established approach for recycling. Like people can just say, "Hey, I've got 2 gallons of used oil," and they know do they just go to Keaau to drop it off? I mean, how does that work?
Yes, we actually do have a collection site here in Keaau. I know in the past we've also done, not on this island, but like on Oahu, we've done like the mixed household recycling events where we would send a truck and then we would pick up, maybe 40 to 100 gallons, whatever people would bring. But yeah, if they're on this side, then yes, by our fuel station in Keaau, we actually have a collection site right there. They can just drop off.
So are there like, I'm asking because I think this is something that we need to socialize. So is it like they just bring their container and leave the container, or do they like empty the container and take it with them?
It really helps if it's in a cooking oil container, or at least something that wasn't so we have some people that bring in like motor oil, and we can't use that. Not here. But like, and then some people put cooking oil in a motor oil container, at which point we have to discard it, because that'd be a contaminant for us. So I'd say as long as it's not in a motor oil container, we're okay.
Okay.
And then
okay.
the site where we have it, basically it's in like a cut open IBC tote containment. So that way, if they put it in there and it drips, it's not going to it's not going to be in the rain. It's not going to go on the ground. It goes in a little contained, area.
Okay. But they essentially leave the container. They have the oil in.
They do.
Like, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And then we in the past we've also done like a dump barrel with a with like what do you say like a screen on top. But the problem we were having was people were putting things in there that weren't cooking oil.
Yeah.
So that's why it's actually worked better for us that they just leave it there in the container that they usually bought it in.
Okay. And how much of that do you typically receive?
It's not consistent. So like, of course, during holidays or say Thanksgiving, for example, Thanksgiving is always a big day for us. After the next few days, people bring in all kinds of oil, and they even leave it at places they really shouldn't. So we have, fuel stations on Big Island, Maui, and on Oahu, we don't actually have any fuel stations ourselves, but we do fill up people occasionally at our plant. But yeah, people leave cooking oil all over the place the week after Thanksgiving.
Like at the fueling stations versus at the Keaau?
Literally anywhere they see our name. I mean, so you like in front of like a fuel station with no connection to our cooking oil side. Yeah, you'll have like a 5-gallon bucket of oil or a couple of them, and then like all these little containers. It's like, no, that's not where those go.
Yeah. It's the what it is, right? It's the deep fryer, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yes,
the turkey fries.
I've done it a few years with our macadamia oil. Actually works pretty good for frying turkeys. Has a pretty high smoke point, not quite as high as peanut oil, but like 420 degrees, not 440. So
yeah,
not bad. But yeah, to answer your question more succinctly, it varies, but I would say between I have to guess on this one. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would say between per month, maybe between 50 and 200 gallons, right around. The reason I say that is sometimes people like you'll have like some like churches or other organizations doing like large frying operations, and then they'll bring in those big cubes, and then some mornings will come in and the whole containment's just filled with that. So
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like a community education opportunity, because otherwise they just get thrown in the dump, right? They end up in the landfill. So
yeah. So to that end, we've worked with like Recycle Hawaii. I know they've had some of our information on their site for like where to take cooking. Jenna was actually on that. She was on that board for a while, a few years back, but doesn't really have the time for it anymore. But that was one of the ways we were kind of getting out there doing that. And of course, we could do a lot of outreach too. I mean, that's where we study at the Sustainable Summit. So
yeah. Okay. Well,
we do that.
Yeah, thanks very much for taking time to share this information. Clearly, I personally think it's a critical part of our, transportation solution, right? Energy solution, and it's a classic example of being able to. It's almost like this whole circularity piece, right? Instead of having all this oil have one use, we're actually figuring out a way to recycle and upcycle, and maybe that's the word, so it can be used further. So I think there's a lot of value.
While I got you, there was one of our co-products I didn't really get to talk about. Is something that's not currently being utilized very well right now. But if you happen to run into somebody who's looking for fertilizer, in this case, we have potassium sulfate. It's one of our co-products, and right now it's being landfilled. But it would be a good source for a potassium-rich fertilizer for crops. So that's one of the things. Go ahead.
So did you say it was being landfilled? So it's being dumped?
It is.
So potassium.
And that's one of the things that we really want to we want to find a better use for, and maybe make a finished fertilizer product out of it.
So what is it again? So potassium sulfate? Did you say?
Potassium sulfate, yeah.
Sulfate. And what is the volume?
I'd have to look again. It's been a while since I worked on that side.
Okay.
It'd probably be between. It's at least like 1,500 pounds, I'd say, maybe per day, something around there.
Per day?
Yeah.
Wow. It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And then,
I mean, yeah, if we're talking about food, there's a lot of conversations right now about food security and growing food. And if this is I'm not a farmer, so, but if you're saying this is an input into fertilizers or a fertilizer, yes, then, there's bound to be some, I mean, especially here on the Big Island, farmers who could make use of this. So it sounds like you have the output being the refined distilled biodiesel. There's the glycerin, there's the methanol, and then there's the potassium sulfate.
So the methanol we use in our process and basically recycle it here on site.
Okay, but is it a byproduct that is then used in the system, or is it an input into the system that's recycled?
It's an input that's recycled and used more efficient.
Okay. So it's more the glycerin and the potassium sulfate as the output, those additional products. Okay, good.
We also produce, of course, the columns, and those we burn in our process. So, like the methanol, it's consumed here. Okay.
And what did you call that again? The byproduct that is burned?
The column bottoms. Yeah. Column bottoms. Essentially, it's a heavy fuel.
Okay. Well, this is great. I learned something today. That's what we're all about. Mitch, did you have any other questions before we wrap up?
No, I'm just really glad you're still selling your sunflower oil.
Yeah. What's curious though is that there's also not just the sunflower oil for cooking, but aren't there other like spa related products that are also being produced?
Yeah. So we haven't made them for a little while, but we had a cosmetics division as well, where we're making. So we made macadamia oil for a long time, that was one of the things. Initially, we were making macadamia oil just for biodiesel, but I found a better way to actually crush it. Basically, where I can control the temperature a little more and use higher grade feedstock. And then I ended up with a food grade product. But before I got that, I was making cosmetic oil.
Yeah.
And so we did some face oils and soaps, and we also had a CBD line for a little while.
So the margin for those things might be quite a bit higher than the biodiesel, right?
It is. However, the amount of work that you put into it, as far as not only the labor, but honestly, the more of the cost is in the marketing side for that kind of thing. And there's just a lot of products out there. It's cosmetics can be a pretty tough business, especially when it comes to really getting your product out there. It's nice working with like fuel, a pretty essential product.
Yeah. Well, it's also biodegradable. So if you're in need of moisturizing after you've fueled the the vehicle, although they have the antioxidants in it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is great. I really appreciate you making the time for this. We recorded this, and we'd love to be able to share it with our community. And I think there's some key takeaways as well in terms of we have looking for a market for the potassium sulfate.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And then there's also educating the community about the service, right? So if they have used cooking oil, I know this is an issue because my mom, she would fry a lot and she would have these containers and she would say, I toss it in the trash. But that's a no-no, right? So I think there's some opportunity to educate the community as well, so that we can actually route those to the plant. Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you for joining us, and Mitch, thanks for joining as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend.
All right, you too.
Okay.
Aloha.
Aloha.